Speaking of wild and wonderful, Allan Taylor joins us. Allan, how you doing, buddy?
I'm feeling both wild and wonderful. Thank you for asking.
I should tell you, happy anniversary. I saw a Facebook post from your fiance. Way to go there, buddy.
You want to know what the rough spot of that was?
Okay.
That photo of the flowers that I'm sure you're referencing.
Uh-huh.
Those flowers were from last year because I didn't come through this year. So
Well, that's okay. I mean, you got to set the bar. You can't set it too high one year and then you're just messed up the rest of the way. That's okay. Hey,
you got to keep it real, man.
Exactly. I mean, as a married man now for almost a year, I'll give you advice through this process for you. Hey, let's do a little football. What was your take on the schedule released today? We were talking, Kachunner and I were a little bit ago. I think you would take the non-conference schedule for next year over this year's any day.
Yeah, and a lot of the Big 12 teams are stepping it up in non-conference next year. But this was probably one of the weaker non-conference schedules West Virginia has played in recent memory. It just kind of broke that way. Might have been a good thing considering how young that offense was, but next year there are certainly some must-see games. The first of two against Missouri, and then going over for another neutral site against what I hope is a future Big 12 team, BYU.
Now, see, that's what I said.
That
I said that too, and Coach Henner just dismissed it. Said bring Brad.
I just don't want to get Brad Howe mad at me.
Don't get him all fired up.
Brad and I have literally yelled at each other over BYU because it's like he's worried that a soccer team is going to have to play on a Sunday or something. I'm like, does not matter. They don't even care about basketball, much less than the Olympic sports. So
yeah.
It's always a funny thing. The conference part of the schedule that really jumps out at you is just how year to year it seems like some things sort of get shaken up. You'd play Oklahoma late in the season back in 2012, and you open the last 2 years with Oklahoma, and now next year they're going back to mid-November. And then Baylor flipping to the end of the schedule next year is something that I wouldn't have guessed. I would have thought it would be another Iowa State or Kansas. So there's at least a little bit of intrigue every year about where teams are going to land. You got Bedlam for the two Oklahoma teams, but it seems like the Big 12 is sort of open to shuffling the deck on some of the other games.
Yeah, that was my other point, too. In terms of the conference schedule, it was so front-loaded this year with the month of October, but at least it's spaced out a little bit better, it seems like, next year.
Yeah, and I think the Big 12 took a little heat for quote-unquote stacking all the quote good games later in the season, but I don't think they knew that those games were necessarily going to be good games. They moved TCU Baylor back. That was probably a good guess, but Oklahoma State Oklahoma is always the last week. Oklahoma Texas is always early, so I'm not sure how much intentional shuffling that was. I think it just broke to the point where the top four teams were playing late. Who knows what will happen next year? West Virginia could be one of those teams that impacts the national championship race, or certainly the Big 12 championship race, even if they're not in it, with Baylor coming in on that last week.
Allan, always something to complain about, I guess, but how big of a problem do you think it is that West Virginia has two open dates in its first four games and then plays 8 straight Saturdays after that?
Yeah, that's not ideal. But then you look at what Texas Tech is going through this year, where they played 10 games or 11 without a bye, and then they have 2 in the last 3 weeks, and one of their bye weeks is technically the start of December, which doesn't even count. So, one of those byes was scheduled by West Virginia, obviously. I mean, having September 17th open between Youngstown State and BYU, that's pretty much on the school that did the scheduling there. So, but the other one coming right after the opener against Kansas State, again, they'd probably like that a few weeks deeper into October or early November. But there's some pretty hard and fast rules that they have. They try not to have a team face an opponent come off a bye more than twice, and I think the only team that has a bye before West Virginia next year is TCU. They have a limit of how many road games you have back-to-back, and West Virginia doesn't have any consecutive road games next year. So, within that time frame, it's not ideal, but it's not as ridiculous as the Texas Tech thing was this year either.
Yeah. What do you make of Iowa State coming up on Saturday, and obviously the news surrounding the Cyclones, and that's going to be a team that's fired up emotionally playing for Paul Rhoads in his final game?
Yeah, I mean, I guess so. I mean, the kids clearly love him, but they loved him to the tune of 3-8 so far. And then when you throw this on top of everything, I just don't think it helps your preparation having it go down. I mean, that emotion, it's hard to stretch that out over 3.5 hours with all the TV breaks and all that. And if you're actually thinking about your coach and the emotion that goes into that, instead of your assignment and your run fit and what you're thinking play to play, I'm not sure it helps. I understand why it went down, and I respect the heck out of Rhodes for sticking around and coaching that game, and I don't think anybody was surprised that he did it or that Jimmy Pollard gave him the opportunity to do it. They seem to be about as close of friends as you could have in a situation where one is firing the other. I mean, you get the feeling that Pollard was really rooting for Rhodes to get that thing right, and it just wasn't happening because of some late game losses. So, I don't know. I'm not a psychologist or psychiatrist or whatever, but you just don't know how it's going to impact those guys coming over from Ames. Whereas you do know pretty much what you've got emotionally with West Virginia, because those guys have beaten the teams they're supposed to beat this year.
Yep. One interesting aspect in terms of Big 12 coaching is there's word coming out of Manhattan, Kansas, that K-State coach Bill Snyder is going to hang around for probably one more year before retiring. There was a lot of speculation he would retire at the end of this season. Catch you by surprise that he's going to come back and he's not going to be a lame duck coach next week when West Virginia goes to K-State?
And certainly, ever since they started slowly, you got the feeling that it might be time for him to step away because he was just worried about not having or leaving that program on a part where it was under good footing. So, maybe it's because of all the other coaching changes that are going on. Maybe he feels like that they would be not even one of the top 7 or 8 jobs out there this year, and it's a bad time to do it. And I mean, if he's still going to work, his team's still playing hard. They've had a chance to win some games they've lost. So, I don't think it's a situation where everybody in Manhattan had fingers crossed that he would step away. I don't even think it's anywhere close to the situation with Beamer at Va Tech, where the time had clearly come for them to make a change. So it's not a bad deal. It probably helps West Virginia going in there. I can't imagine what the crowd atmosphere and the environment would have been like if that were Snyder's last home game, although K-State's probably still going to be playing for bowl eligibility, so there will be something on the line.
I'm going to speak with Allan Taylor, WVMetroNews.com. Last thing, Allan, and I'll let you go. What's your take on hoops here? What are you looking to see as things they're going to be facing a couple of more tougher opponents coming up later this week?
Yeah, I think it's somewhat akin to what happened in Puerto Rico last year when they went down there for 3 games and you didn't know, really what you had. So depending on who they draw in the finals over there in Vegas on Thursday and Friday, you might know a little bit more about this team. They really haven't played anybody yet. JMU may wind up being a 14 or 15 seed in the tournament, so that was a decent indication. But the other 3 teams they've faced were just early season filler. So the only good thing about that is West Virginia beat the snot out of them. So they did what they were supposed to do, and we'll know a little bit more after Vegas. That should be a pretty interesting 36 hours over there.
Yeah. All right, good deal, man. Appreciate the time. Good luck with those flowers, and we'll see you on Saturday.
Thanks, buddy. I'll schedule some premarital counseling with you when I get back.
There you go. It's going to cost you, but okay. That's fine. There you go. It's Allan Taylor, WVMetroNews.com. We've got